Hey, it's me, TB, and today I'm bringing to you my best books of 2021 video. I will go ahead and say that I don't own a lot of these physically yet, so I will have to put up a little picture of them. And these are also not in any particular order, so I guess let's get started. So I will go ahead and kind of get through a few runner-ups, because originally I did have like 17 books on this list, but obviously I had to cut that down. So this runner-up section won't be as detailed because they're not the main focus, but it will give you at least like some background information. So first is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. Listen, I thought that I would hate this because it's about Caine, but Sartok is great, and honestly he might be one of my favorite characters from the series, so I'm kind of mad that we don't have more time for Sartok to kind of grow as a character, but still I love him, he's great. Like, I like the entire journey throughout this continent. It was a great time, you know? Here's a nonfiction book called Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia. Obviously, this is about Aboriginal Australians talking about their experiences in Australia and growing up. Duh. I'll just say that pretty much every book I talk about is either a 4 or 5 stars. I think most of them are 5s. There were a few 4s I wanted to talk about anyway because they did leave a pretty big impact on me. So that's why, even if they aren't a full 5 stars, I still think that, because I still think about them a lot, that obviously they're probably going to be the books that I remember the most from 2021. And there is Bensound in Baghdad, which is a story about this scavenger named Hadi who ends up piecing together a corpse from various parts in order for the government to kind of bury it as a full body. This takes place during the U.S. occupation of Baghdad in the mid to late 2000s, and deals a lot with the effects that the war had on the populace of Baghdad, and what their lives were like during that time, of course with a more fantastical element of this Frankenstein-like monster running around. Then there is White Hot Kiss by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a paranormal romance between our character, I don't remember her name, but she is, I think, part warden and part demon, so that's like a bad thing, so people can't know that she's part demon or whatever. Because she has the power to kind of take people's souls if she kisses them, of course, in the romance. So eventually we meet Roth, who is our demon, and she can kiss him just fine because he has no soul. So obviously stuff ensues. It was a cute time. I think I liked this first trilogy more than its sequel trilogy, but still it was a great time. Then there is The Break by, I think, Katharina Vermette. I have this, but I have no idea where it is because I have a lot of junk. I have a lot of stuff everywhere right now. But that's here, and it's about a teenage girl gets raped in the area known as The Break, and it kind of follows the investigation and the after effects that kind of ripple throughout her family and their surrounding community. Then there is The Brightlands by I forget his name. I think it's John Fram. You'll have it up here, so you'll be fine. But this is a thriller about a main character who has moved from Texas to New York to get away from his homophobic and racist hometown, but he has to go back after his brother goes missing. After his brother has kind of sent out a few weird texts about how he wants to leave and how he's not safe there in their hometown. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. I did like the final twist on it. And finally, for our last runner-up, there is The Bondwoman's Narrative by Hannah Crafts. This is the first book. This was written by Hannah while she was enslaved in the 1850s and 1860s. And I think this was the first book published by a Black American, I'm pretty sure. If not, the first one's probably up there. Regardless, I think this is the only novel we have that was written by an enslaved person. So there you go. This is following, so our main character is also called Hannah, and kind of following her as she escapes slavery, and I guess what happens afterwards, kind of. But the novel does mostly focus on the Gothic, the sentimental novel that were popular whenever this was written. And you see that kind of bleed throughout the novel. So it's a draft of a novel, it's not a full thing, because Hannah never finished it, at least not that we know of. So it's kind of based on the manuscript that she had, or that we were able to get. So there are sections like this where the lines are kind of cut out or blocked out, because that's where she decided to cut out a sentence and start over. So yeah, it was a very interesting time to read another writer's rough draft, basically. Now onto my main list. First, there's Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. It basically has to be here because I wrote a whole 15-page paper about it. So obviously I do like it a lot, And I think it was the only books that I read it twice in 1 year. I read it first in January and again in like November-ish, because I read it to write a paper and a presentation for my Gothic literature class. This is a satire of Gothic novels and follows Catherine Morland as she's kind of like introduced to like the big city for the first time. And while there, she meets the Tonys, and eventually they ask her to go back with them to their abbey called Northanger Abbey. And while there, she thinks that she is the heroine of a Gothic novel. So obviously this book does criticize a lot of like Gothic tropes and ideas at the time. As a whole, I think it's like really funny. Like I think I actually did laugh a few times. And I think that it does what it set out to do very well. In the sense that it criticizes the Gothic while also not being overly critical about it. Because I think that by criticizing the Gothic, Austen was trying to criticize society at the time as like a whole and how it treated women. I do understand why people don't like Catherine as our main heroine. Personally, I love her. I do like Mr. Tony, even though he is a little bit of an ass. I still love him. So it's always very interesting to read about like a satire novel, because usually most classics tend to be more like their own stories. But this is like acknowledging that there are other books that were being written at the time, and points out that like we're not the first, era to kind of notice tropes come up in the media that we consume. So, I don't know. I actually liked it. As a whole, I do like Jane Austen's works, so no surprise. But I don't know. I actually like reading this again, because even on my reread, it was like a fun time. I loved it. Catherine was great. Just honestly, I do really love this book as a whole, and it deserves more respect than it gets, because he ends up usually being one of Austen's more like lesser talked about works. But I do maintain that it is like in her like top 2 or 3 books. So anyway, then there is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This follows our unnamed main character as she marries the very wealthy Mr. De Winter after his ex-wife died the previous summer, I think. And basically when she moves into their big fancy house, she's haunted by the idea of Rebecca, because every time she tries to like do something or change something, people bring up Rebecca and how she did things. So kind of she comes over like overwhelmed by the idea that like she will never be able to match up to who Rebecca was. So she's kind of like haunted by the concept of Rebecca. Did atmosphere so fucking well. Like you feel like you are in the same place that our narrator is feeling. I'm kind of stuck in a world where people keep talking about Rebecca over and over again. Because like, I'm not gonna lie, whenever I went into like the real world afterwards, like every time I would hear the name like Rebecca for like a solid like week or 2 afterwards, I would like jump. So yeah, obviously it does a really good job like giving you that Gothic atmosphere, and you do really feel that you were like in this manor on the coast with my character, because like it is so described so well, or it is described so well. Fucking idiot, Jesus. And yeah, the little like romance was cute, but still feel like overall the best parts of this book are the atmosphere and like our main character's kind of like mental discussion of like how things are kind of like folding or kind of like happening, I guess. So like our character has a very interesting like mind, so it feels like a really interesting place to be like inside of her mind while she's kind of like working through things, I guess. I think that it's very impressive to like have a book with a like non-named main character, so for them to be like so interesting to like read about. So yeah, that is Rebecca. I'm gonna go ahead and get my 3 nonfiction books out of the way, just because I know they're gonna be pretty fast to go through, so I'm just gonna do them all right now. So first is 7 Fallen Feathers by Tanya Talaga, and this is a book kind of analyzing how between like a 10-year span, I think between like 2000 and 2011, or give or take a few years, there's this one place in Thunder Bay where like a lot of these students went to this one specific school, and they all end up being found dead either in the river or close to the river, I'm pretty sure. It's kind of just a book analyzing kind of the society and cultural things that Canada has done to kind of make it so this happens and like no one cares, basically. Also kind of giving each of these dead children their own moment to kind of talk about them as people and their own lives and backstories before they died, and how like this could have been prevented every step of the way, but Canada just didn't do anything to fix it, basically. It's obviously a very heavy read, but I do think that it reads very accessible, is the best way to say it. Like there weren't any times where I feel like it was too much, I guess. Like it didn't read like a history book or anything like too dense. It felt very accessible. So yeah, not a lot to say about it besides that, it's nonfiction, and I liked how the author made her point, how she organized things, so on and so forth. And third, I just have another book about like the phenomenon around like Indigenous children committing suicide worldwide. that I also read in 2021. It was heavy and insightful, but it's probably one of the better written things that I ended up reading this year. So next is The Making of Biblical Womanhood, How the Subjugation of Women Became Gospel Truth by Beth Allison Barr. This is a nonfiction book about how the message of the Bible has been twisted over the centuries to kind of be all about how women should be submissive, but basically the author kind of goes in and kind of analyzes how the Bible does not actually advocate for women having to be submissive, and like how over the centuries these like core ideas that the Bible stands for has been like twisted to suit the patriarchy basically. And I'm pretty sure I did read this like a few weeks ago, so like kind of like all on my head already, but I did like it. But it's going to talk about a few very important moments throughout the history of the development of the Bible, how that kind of led to this idea of subjugation, how the choices are made at these very important points kind of led to the subjugation of women, pretty much, as well as giving us a lot of like historical background for what the reality would have been like during the Bible era, as well as how like the way you read the Bible kind of like change the message just by like the context in which certain parts were given. So for instance, I think there's like one part in one of the like Paul related epistles that kind of talks about how women should be submissive, but Barr kind of says that if you read it as if Paul was mocking the people that he was writing to, it becomes like less about the oppression of women and more about how Paul was against the oppression of women, pretty much. Interesting to read about. And yeah, it was a good time. Is The Liberal Redneck Manifesto. So this is a book about how these three men that are all born and bred Southerners kind of talk about the South and kind of like, I guess this kind of like explain the South and why it is the way that it is, and how they're all like liberal things in the South that people don't think about. How like a lot of times the like bad parts people think about are kind of like the more liberal city people kind of like forcing things onto the South that aren't necessarily true. So they talk about like the Second Amendment stuff with like guns, talk about how food and diabetes plays into the South because the South has a very high rate of like diabetes and obesity. Talks about like families and how that kind of plays into the idea of like Southern identity. We're also talking about how the South especially has to deal with a lot of like drug addiction problems, mostly pills. So yeah, there are a few heavy parts, but overall it is told through mostly like humorous lens because the three writers are all comedians. Obviously it is like heavy, but it is a more like lighter spin on things basically. So back to fiction, we have Slave to Sensation by Nalini Singh. This is the first book in her long-running side Changeling series. There are like over 20 books, I think, like the overall series. This is like book one. Let me tell you, for book one, it does a very good job of like setting stuff up. Basically, in this world, there are the Sai and the Changelings. So in this world, well, there are like Sai, Changelings, and humans. Basically, Sai rule everything because they have like psychic powers, and because of their psychic powers, they kind of like are able to control and like do everything pretty much. And because their powers come from like their mental faculties, they were prone to being very emotional, like having breakdowns. But I think decades prior to the start of the book, there was this event called the Silence, or basically all the Sai kind of like linked up to this like hive mind, I guess is the best way to say it, and they kind of like turned off and got rid of all their emotions. And when you were like shown to be feeling anything, you were kind of like taken in and basically like tortured until you revert back. But the dark side of this is like anyone that is like taken into the government kind of like be, I guess, beaten back into not feeling anything. They never come out. So it's kind of like they kind of kill you. It's kind of assumed. So yeah, of course, our main character is a Sai, and our hero is a changeling. So of course, stuff ensues because she meets him and she starts to feel things. Oh no, and it's like a whole thing. Oh yeah, and like changelings are like shapeshifters basically. So I'm pretty sure in this book he is a jaguar, I think, or like some big cat, pretty much. And yeah, basically, you know, she feels nothing. He feels a lot. And the changelings kind of like show their affection through touch. So even like in a non-romantic way, the packs will like touch and hug each other a lot to show affection for each other, which is like very foreign for the side because they don't interact like that at all. It's just cute. And this, for like a variety of reasons, because I'm pretty sure it's this one where like she has like dirty dreams about the hero, and they both think that they're having dirty dreams, but it's like pretty obvious that like their dreams are like connecting. So that's what's pretty cute. But yeah, listen, I liked it. I read up to like book 3 in the series, and so far they've all been like really good. So yeah, I do highly recommend the series as a whole so far. And they're also very like action heavy sequences. because obviously, with an oppressive government, we are going to be trying to kind of take it down. But it's like a slow process because like even in book 3, we haven't like done a whole lot. We're having like strikes against the government, nothing like major as of yet because we still have so far to go. But yeah, listen, it was a good time. There were some sexy moments. I did love the romance arc. The world building is fucking fantastic. Just honestly, if you want like more like urban fantasy / paranormal romance series, here you go. It's fucking great. So next up is The Marrow of Tradition by Charles W. Chestnut. This was first published in 1901, and it is a historical fiction about an event that happened, I think, in 1898-ish. But basically, the author wrote this because he was angry that the media was kind of trying to paint this event as something that it wasn't. Because basically, this is about how the town of Wilmington, North Carolina, ended up chasing out, I think, a lot or most of their black residents. And the media was trying to paint this as like a positive thing that they did willingly, I think. But Chestnut went and wrote this to kind of show the dark side of it, and that it was very racially motivated and all about aggression and just the like amount of brutality that the white people did kind of force the black residents out. And we're told this through the perspectives of like one of the white business people and I think a black doctor that is coming back into town. He is, I think, biracial. So pretty sure him having lighter skin does come into play, I think, towards the start, at least a little bit, if I remember right. Basically, it's showing like the racial tensions between the whites and the blacks, and how this eventually leads to white people thinking that they are in danger, so on and so forth. Then they kind of like force all the black people out by shooting them and kind of like forcing them out via violence. So yeah, not necessarily the happy / peaceful thing the media would probably want it to be back then. So yeah, it's just like so well written, and yeah, it's also one of those things that was like written so well that I can't like not rate it highly. Then there is The Conjure Man Dies by Rudolph Fisher. This was the first detective novel written by an African American. So there you go. And in this, the body of a conjure man is discovered dead in his little like ceremony area, and there are 2 detectives that are called in to investigate. You can probably guess what happens from there. In the place that where the conjure man was like working in, there are like secret passageways. There are like missing things that might not be related to the murder. You'll be like, you really have no idea like how the conjure man died, because there are like a variety of things that might have like led to his death. It's like a whole thing. And interestingly enough, like I think every character in this book, or at least most of them, they're all black. And the first like half-ish of this novel takes place when they first get to the scene, and the second half kind of follows up afterwards. So a very interesting thing like to be paced in this way, because usually like detective stories, like more mystery / thrillers, would not be paced this way. But it works like really well. It probably sounds like having the first half based in just like when they first get to the scene would be very like boring. It's very like fast-paced and interesting because they're trying to they keep finding out more and more things that might lead to like figuring out what happened. Personally, I did not see it coming, but who knows, you might. Like the worst part about this is that the author kind of planned for like more books with these like main detectives, but he died before it could happen through like questionable medical circumstances, because of like hospitals and doctors. It's kind of like question marks about whether or not the author was pretty much given less than a safe place to be surgically operated on. We'll say. I will not say anything directly. Not really surprised, given like the history of how the U.S. medical system has treated black people. Not that surprised, but yeah, it should definitely be considered like a mystery / crime classic because it was just written so well. Then there is Wolfsong by T.J. Klune. This is a like romance with werewolves. So basically, our main character Ox doesn't really have a lot of friends because he's like weird, quote unquote, and he works at a mechanic shop. Is that what they're called? Mechanic workshops, something like that. Who knows? But he works there, and there he kind of like has this found family moment, and eventually a new family moves in next door to him, and through them he meets their youngest son named Joe, I think. I might be crazy, but I think so. So anyway, they're there. There is like an age gap, but for like 4 years. Like Ox is like 16, I think, and Joe is like 12. But nothing happens until like they're both like legal. So like don't worry. They are like mostly friends until Joe is like, I think like 17 or 18. So it isn't like as creepy as it sounds, I promise you, because I mentioned this in my review too, but the age gap between Rose and Dimitri in Vampire Academy is worse. So you can't be too judgmental here. And like this book is like mostly vibes for like the first like 30%, and then shit goes down. It becomes very sad and depressing, and then the ending happens, which is kind of like sad and depressing and heavy, because like a lot of people die in this book. And it's like really heavy and sad, because again, it's been like just a vibe so far for like most of this. So you don't expect death, but then death happens, and it kind of fucks up everyone. And yeah, it's a heavy time. I might have cried, I'm not sure, but yeah, it was a really heavy time. It was great, don't get me wrong, it was fucking fantastic. Probably the closest thing I've ever read to like a more like literary panorama romance, to be honest, because how it was written was still very heavy on the feels, but also so a great time. And now finally, there is Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nascosta. This is a minotaur romance, and listen to me, I know it sounds weird, but it was like the cutest shit ever, so it kind of has to be here. So basically, our main character is Violet, and she is a like struggling millennial, of course, and while looking for jobs, she finds this job listing in this place called Cambric Creek, where they are a milking farm. Fuck. As you can guess, this goes in a very like dirty way, because they basically jerk off dicks. They jerk off minotaur dicks basically all day, because the semen has a very like healthy properties basically. And it sounds so fucking stupid saying it out loud. It sounds so fucking stupid. But listen, it's so cute. I promise you, it's so fucking cute. It's very like dirty. Listen, I thought it was fucking cute and great. There is like a happily ever after, because she ends up like meeting one of her clients, of course, and they take things like outside of the workplace basically, and stuff ensues. It's very cute and wholesome. I loved it. And yeah, the smut was very nice. It doesn't take itself like too seriously, so it's kind of like funny too. But honestly, it was great. I can't wait to read more from the series. So yeah, those are my best books of 2021. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe, like, share, all of that. Hopefully I will see you next week.